Okay, so let's resume. Um, what I want to do with Pope today, I mean, my goal when going through these philosophers is to talk about, and you've noticed I tossed in a bunch of wacky examples as I went. I mentioned Jurassic Park for Pope, but I want to try to spend a little more time with some examples. And it's important because to work with examples. Number one, because the examples make it much easier to remember what the hell's going on. A lot of these guys make claims about all art everywhere. Art should be like this, and art should be like that. And it's like, what art? Like, we need to pick some examples to talk about. Otherwise, you don't know what you're saying. Like, imagine having a conversation with a person where they tell you what they like about movies and dislike about movies, but they never mention a movie. You need an actual movie. So we're going to need some examples. So I'm going to talk about Hamlet in a second. You guys have already put up with some exhausting stuff. I want to give you something a little sillier to look at briefly. As you've noticed, I like pop culture also, so that's why I'm looking forward to your papers. As many of my students choose to write about pop culture because they're excited to write about TV and movies and anime and things for me. And I'm happy. I'm perfectly happy to read a paper on Naruto. Um, so okay, so I've got two clips here in this little clip collection for you, and there's two clips. One of them is from a movie from 1999, Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. The clip that I've given you is a bunch of different scenes from that movie. It's a Star Wars movie, and Darth Vader is from Star Wars. And in The Phantom Menace, which is a movie that a lot of people were very excited about in 1999, people lost their minds. This was a movie that was supposed to change everything. It was going to be this huge achievement. Because this is not technically correct, but basically, it was the first movie where all the backgrounds were done in a computer. They and that actually did become kind of important. You look at a movie like Avengers Endgame, a lot of the backgrounds are being done in a computer. So it kind of broke the technology. It invented the technology on that thing, and people were so excited because George Lucas, who did Star Wars, was this famous special effects guy, and he had changed the history of movies forever with his Star Wars movies in the 70s and 80s because he invented all of this special effects technology. And then here he was coming back in 1999 with a Star Wars prequel, and he was going to change everything again with all of his fancy technology, and he kind of did. I mean, people say bad things about the prequels, and they're pretty bad. But the idea of you can computer generate all the backgrounds, I mean, it's a pretty big piece of technology that is used in every superhero movie now. Um, so okay, the problem was um, he spent so much time on the special effects that he fucked up everything else. And so the Star Wars Phantom Menace was a famous disaster of a movie. It is so bad. It is just an atrocious film. And there's a bunch of problems with it, including the fact that Star Wars was meant to be for like young people, but then those people grew up and they were still Star Wars fans when they got older. And then when the new Star Wars movies come out, they were expecting something for them, and it was something aimed at like very small children. There were characters like Jar Jar Binks who were aimed at very small children, and they were so offended. But like Star Wars was always a kids movie. It's just that people took it real seriously and treated it like a thing for adults, and then they were super offended when the new movies did not do that. So, anyway, why am I saying this? Because the Darth Vader appears in the Phantom Menace, but as a very small kid. He's like a little kid. I don't know how old the kid. I'm not good at kids' ages, but I don't know. He's like 7. Maybe he's younger than that. Maybe he's like 6. I don't know. The point is, he's a little kid. The actor they got to play this little kid, he's very bad. He's very, very bad. Now, you might not be used to judging acting or thinking about it in this way, and so when you watch the clip, sometimes I think some of my students are like, "Oh shit, that kid's a terrible actor," but some of my other students don't necessarily see it, and that's okay. It took me a long time to really recognize good acting from bad acting. It's one of those things that can take time. Partly, and I hate to say this, but partly because so many movies always have bad acting, you start to think that it's normal. If you watch enough movies that have bad acting in them, you're like, what's wrong with this? This is just what normal movies look like. But like, oh my God, it's not good. And a lot of people made fun of this poor kid. And actually, that kind of ruined his life. He had a tough life after the movie was over. So I want to be clear: we're not making fun of the kid. I'm not showing you clips of this kid being a bad actor to say, haha, look at how terrible this kid is. It's not the kid's fault. I mean, if you asked me to be in a Star Wars movie, of course I would say yes. You're asking me to be in a Star Wars movie. I'd love to be in a Star Wars movie. That'd be so much fun to see my face up on screen. But if you put me in a Star Wars movie, guys, I would do a shitty job. I'd be really bad. But you could still kind of blame me because I'm an adult. But it feels really mean. People blame the kid. They were like, this kid's a terrible actor. What an idiot. He's the worst. And it's like, dude, it's not the kid's fault. It's George Lucas's fault. He made the movie. He put the kid in it. He should have done that. Anyway, the kid's not great. So watch the clips of the kid in Star Wars. And Star Wars obviously is not a realistic movie. I mean, for starters, Pope would dislike a lot about it, including the fact that there's a lot of things that the electric swords don't make any sense. They bend light or something. It's just silly. But also, the the backgrounds are all fake, right? Every background in the Phantom Menace that you see is like generated by a computer. It looks pretty good, but it still isn't. Pope would say it is not anchored to reality, because it's anchored to a green screen in a computer, and that's not reality. And Pope would be very against this. I think Pope would not like our blockbuster movies, which have these computer-generated effects. Which, in my now you're gonna this makes me seem old, but if you look at a movie that's made in a real place versus a movie like Phantom Menace that's made of where a computer is trying to generate a real place, it never looks right. The computer can never get it to look right, because real places are much more dynamic and interesting than people design in computers. It's very, very hard to get a computer simulation to look like reality. And so a lot of times when I watch these movies, they feel like they don't take place in reality. They take place in a weird computer world. And Pope would really dislike that because the whole movie, then, the setting of the movie, is not anchored to nature. The other thing that's not anchored to nature or reality is the little kid that plays Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader. He's a very bad actor, and he acts. If you've ever met little kids, he doesn't act like a little kid you've ever met. He acts like a kid who's had a lot of training to be in a movie. He definitely says all the words, but he just doesn't say them like a normal person would. Now, it might not jump out at you immediately, but I've got you another clip, which I think will demonstrate it. It's from a movie that you almost certainly have not seen. It's one of my favorite movies. It's called The Fall. And it's a beautiful little film about a little girl who befriends she's in a hospital, and she makes friends with a stuntman in a movie in the 1930s who's been injured. He's broken his back, and he's paralyzed, and he's very, very sad. And he wants to commit suicide, and she makes friends with him. And he tells her a story to like manipulate her, because he wants her to go steal drugs for him so he can kill himself. And it has a happy ending. It's a lovely little movie. But the little girl in the movie is fucking perfect. She's the greatest little kid actor I've ever seen in my life. She's about the same age as the little kid in Phantom Menace, and she's amazing. And what makes her amazing is if you've ever talked to a little kid, this is how they talk. She talks just like a real little kid. She doesn't understand some of the questions he asks her, but she pretends like she does. She just goes, uh-huh. But she clearly has no idea what he means. But little kids are just like, oh, yeah. She rambles, and she gets lost, and she stops in the middle of sentences and starts them over, because that's how little kids talk. They're learning to talk. And so what I would ask you to do is to watch the clip from Star Wars, and then watch the clip of the little girl in The Fall. And Pope would not like Phantom Menace because it's not anchored to reality. It's not realistic. Hell, it's all being made in a computer. It's not even being filmed in a real place. But also that kid is not anchored to reality because he's a bad actor. And the whole point of acting is you're supposed to imitate the way one of the things you can do with acting is imitate the way real people talk. And that kid's not doing that. He does a terrible job. But if you look at the little girl in The Fall, she does an amazing job. And so I think it's worth pointing out that you could have improved Phantom Menace by putting a better actor as the kid. Now, the movie still would have been unrealistic, but at least that kid's performance, and he's like the emotional core of the first 6 movies because he's Darth Vader. He's got to be anchored to reality, otherwise it's hard to care about him if he doesn't seem like a person. He just seems like an actor reciting lines. Doesn't seem like a real little kid. By the way they got the little girl in The Fall to act, and this is really worth knowing. It's a really interesting detail in the film. The little kid in Phantom Menace has been given a script, so he has to memorize lines and say them. And when he speaks, he sounds like he's reading them off of a page. The little girl in The Fall was not given a script at all. She was just told to go talk to this guy in the bed and have a conversation with him. So she's not given a script. She's kind of making it up. Like, he asks her questions, and whatever she says, they just film it. But it's why it's not even really. I mean, it's a performance. She knows she's in a movie. It's not like they're tricking her. But she's acting like herself. He just asks her a question, and whatever she answers, they keep it in the movie. But that's why that's happening. So it's a great thing to kind of look at those two things and compare, and to think that for Pope, like, you're not going to make Phantom Menace realistic, but you could have made that one character more realistic by putting a better actor in there. At least that one detail of the movie, Darth Vader, kind of an important detail, would have been anchored to reality. See you in the next video.